Tonight's greetings to all our audience. This is Professor Brooke Hailubesha from Nahu TV. Our program is called Voice of the Diaspora. Today, I feel really honored for having a very important personality, a public figure with me. He is none other than Professor Lawrence Freeman from the USA, from the great state of Maryland. Professor Freeman, it's good to see you in person.
Yes, and it's lovely to be here in Addis, and it's a very nice building.
Wonderful. I bet it's not your first time to be in Addis. I've heard you have been here many, many times. Huh?
This is my 8th visit.
8th visit in Addis. Yeah.
To Ethiopia.
And also, you are, dear audience, Professor Lawrence Freeman is well known by the Ethiopian diaspora as well as by the Ethiopian publicum, academia, research, public figures everywhere. He's a great advocate and fighter, really on behalf of the cause of Ethiopia. Most of you, I'm sure, will know him of his activity the last 2 years, fighting the fight, as we say in America, Professor Freeman, fighting the fight on behalf of the Ethiopia and on behalf of justice, on behalf of humanity.
Yes.
This is your principle. Not just partisanship, but really based on substance and principles. That's why Ethiopians really are very happy they follow with interest what you are doing. And I also, as a member of the Ethiopian diaspora, I used to know you, and I know you from afar. Both of us give lectures here and there. Both of us are academics in different universities, different media. Both of us fight our own fight. And we have participated also in a number of Zoom meetings, especially since COVID.
Yes.
And guess what? Today is my first physical encounter, not the virtual, physical encounter with you. And I'm honored to get to know you.
I'm happy to be here, and I have to fight for justice. When policies are wrong, I have to attack them. And I usually end up being on the side of the people and against some of the big powers. And I do it because I want to. No one tells me to do it. No one supports me. I just do it because it's the right thing to do. And at this time, I've been doing it for so long, I can't help myself. I just do it. I don't even think about it.
Yes, it takes only to read your articles and to listen and watch your interviews on which side your heartbeat beats.
Yes.
Honestly. And well put. Dear audience, by the way, he's Professor Lawrence Freeman is a political economist. He's a political economist analyst for Africa and African affairs. It's not only Ethiopia.
No.
Your encounter with Africa goes back. If you could briefly share with us to which countries and when did you start coming to Africa and for what reason, I'll be more than be honored.
Well, I started writing about Africa and lecturing it in the United States around 1989.
I see.
And some Cameroonians became interested in my ideas, so I was addressing their conference. And then some people in Nigeria were watching me because Nigeria in the 1990s was going political turmoil. Sani Abacha became the ruler, elections were annulled. And then what happened was some people I had not known, very close to the government, political intelligence circle, they asked me to come over in 1994, in the summer, spring, summer.
Interesting.
So I landed at Lagos Airport in June of 1994.
Wow.
And then I was spending weeks and weeks traveling in Nigeria, meeting with people, meeting with the government. I mean, I wrote hundreds of articles. And then I moved over to Sudan.
The Sudan?
Yeah, where people were attacking the government. So I organized trips of African American state legislators to go to Sudan and dispute this issue of slavery. So I was going to Nigeria, going to Sudan, late 1990s, early 200s. So I must have made 13, 14 trips to Nigeria over the years.
Wow.
I was in Sudan 9 or 10 times. I opposed genocide policy against Bashir. There was no genocide before. I spoke at their conferences. And then things have just evolved from there. I've been in Cote d'Ivoire I was there for the last election of President Ouattara.
I see.
Chad, where I work on the Lake Chad Basin Commission, I was there. And then I started coming to Ethiopia around 2014.
I see.
I also spent a week in Mali in 2013. So, and then I have people in the United States that I do work for, research, writing, analysis, for people and for governments both.
Wonderful. So you are a great friend of Africa, I would say, the African continent as well.
Yeah, with the last 30 years, year by year, month by month, I've become more and more involved in Africa. The last 5 years have just consumed me. I used to do a lot of other things. And the last 5 years, it's Africa, and then my hobby is hiking and camping in the United States. I go off, I hike every week 10 to 12 miles.
Wow.
And then I go off camping in the woods with my tent and my sleeping bag and my food, and I stay off in the woods for a while.
Wow.
You
spend the night in the forest and
several nights.
So you are sort of with nature then, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not an environmentalist, but I like the forest. I like climbing rocks, walking along streams. I enjoy it.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us a glimpse of who you are, because it's important for our audience, you know. And we do hope that you'll visit some of our national parks in Ethiopia, I mean.
Yeah, I would like to hike some of your parks.
Yeah.
To put on my hiking shoes and walk around the park. I've never had the time to do it. But if I could find out how, I definitely want to.
Yeah, there's always a next trip, a next time. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm always usually stuck in Addis. In 2014, I went on a trip for 2 to 3 days down in Lake Hawassa area and the Great Rift Valley. That's before Hawassa Park.
I see.
And then last year, I went to Lalibela for a couple of days by myself. And then this weekend, past weekend, I went to Alamata and then to the Gerd.
Good.
So I've gotten out of Addis 4 times.
Wonderful. That's fair enough. Thank you. So let's start off. You know, you have made numerous visits to Ethiopia, and let's start off with asking you. I want to ask you, what brought you to Ethiopia this time?
This time?
Yes, sir.
Well, I was concerned that following the peace agreement and the trying to bring the country back together, and there were still, even after the peace agreement, there were many people still attacking Ethiopia from the west. I wanted to say that I went to an area and watched the rebuilding and humanitarian effort. So I worked out with my friends to go to Alamata because it was just liberated the last week of October.
Yeah, true.
And I talked to the people, I went to the market, I went to the distribution center. So I was able to get a good first-hand view of how the government is trying to rehabilitate and develop the area after the 2 years of the war.
Very good. Yeah, quite interesting. You know, Professor Freeman, the last 2 years were very, very painful periods in Ethiopia.
Yes.
For us Ethiopians, for all friends of Ethiopia, wherever they are.
Right.
Why is it painful? Because it's an internal matter. It's you know, brother against brother, of course.
Yep.
But the point is, you know, after 27 years of rule, the previous political leadership, you know, went back to the regional state of Tigray. Then they began to disengage themselves from all kinds of parliamentary representation, you know, withdrawing from portfolios and ministerial positions. And then we sensed that something was going wrong, you know. And on top of that, that fateful day, November the 3rd and November the 4th, 2020, as you know, the whole thing just blew up.
Yes.
And that was really, really sad. Absolutely sad. And we have come a long way. The Ethiopian entity, the Ethiopian polity, preserved our unity because if the outcome was the other outcome, we know what would have happened. Given the rhetoric that came from that region of Ethiopia, but you know the sacrifice, the pain, the loss of lives, loss of damages that you saw in Alamata, in other areas, you know, reconstruction, everything costed a lot, and at least now we have started a new chapter of peaceful, trying to peacefully resolve the issue, the agreement and the like. When you look back now, the entire process, like a fast-forward movie, so to speak, what do you feel? And where would you be thinking we are going now?
Well, I think that if you look prior to the war, conflict, Ethiopia was emerging in Africa as somewhat as an economic model, because you were lowering the rate of poverty. You had the development of the Addis Ababa-Djibouti Railroad in 2016. You were pushing ahead with the dam. And so there was a very strong pro-development, pro-people growth policy in Ethiopia, which from my survey of the continent was somewhat unique. And I think other people were looking in that direction, the progress that Ethiopia was making and providing leadership. So once you have the war, that really hurts everything. And you have an ugly war. I don't know how many people were killed, but it was quite a few. And that is somewhat of a setback. And now, after the peace, the question is moving forward.
True.
So we had a piece of paper signed in Pretoria.
Yeah.
So we have to take the piece of paper and turn it into a durable peace for the country.
True.
Because agreements can be just sabotaged, come apart. And my view is, I wanted to tell people directly, being here, is we've got to move on quickly now, a massive reconstruction of the North, Afar, Amara, Tigray.
Yes, true.
And we have to make that a special emphasis so people see the country, they see the government cares about them. We don't want to lose the lives of many people.
Yeah.
But that should be part of a major national growth program for Ethiopia.
True.
A lot can be done in industry, which is a big weak point in Africa, and a lot can be done in agriculture. One of the things about Alamada was very interesting were two. One is I got to see the food distribution, which was bittersweet for me, because on the one hand, we had 2,000 bags of USAID wheat, each 50 kilograms, and some edible oil and some split pea being distributed each 5 days, different districts. The day we were there was 7,272 people. Now, these people needed this food to survive.
Very true.
Because they've been destroyed. They lost husbands, wives, houses. But what bothered me a bit was that you had human beings just sitting on the ground for 5 hours, waiting to get their name checked, and then picking up the food, and then loading on 110 pounds on women's backs to carry off to the home. That bothered me.
That's painful,
So the only way to eliminate this, because we have to feed people. Otherwise, if they didn't get this wheat from the USA, they wouldn't make it. But we have to eliminate the need for it, because I looked at the Alamada region. I don't know if you've been there.
Yeah, I know.
Massive agricultural potential.
Yeah.
I mean, very good plots of land.
True.
Some of them even looked as good as the Midwest United States. As a Midwesterner, you know.
Yeah.
So if we have to have massive agricultural expansion, irrigation, fertilizer, mechanization. Like if you take Indiana, Ohio, Iowa, the tonnage of product per acre is enormous. Europe has it too, Western Europe. Well, where does that come from? It comes from infrastructure. It comes from irrigation. You almost irrigate no amount of land here.
Very true.
So we have to make a big expansion in agriculture so people can feed themselves and even export food.
Very true. In order to do that, by the way, I had planned to ask you a bit later on, but since you have put it in a very logical way, allow me to indulge in that. From the readings, your readings that I have come across, from the numerous interviews that you give, you always hammer certain points. Among them, which are numerous, by the way, among them is the importance of railway links, the importance of building infrastructures that will propel even developing countries, society like Africa, bring them up. If you could comment on that.
If you look at the history of civilization, the infrastructure changes, but you always have an integrated platform, which embodies within it a certain level of technology, roads, rail, energy, etc. And your economy grows in it. Now, as you improve your infrastructure as a result of technological advances, that increased value continues to spread to your economy. And the energy source you use, where was our economies when we were burning wood? Or where were they when burning coal? Now you move to oil, to gas, to hydro.
Yep.
Fission energy is now completely operational. We just don't have any in Africa, except for South Africa. Then, of course, we want to move to fusion, which they just did a successful break-even experiment last week on fusion. But all these technologies bring in new value to the economy. So the denser of our infrastructure, railroads. Look, Africa is dying. And I'm not using this metaphorically. Africans die because we have less than 90,000 megawatts for sub-Saharan Africa
Energy,
for over a billion people.
True.
You need railroads crisscrossing the continent. You need energy for everything you do. If you want to maintain a hospital, you need energy. You need refrigerated cars to carry your crop, you need energy.
Exactly.
You want to build an industry, you need energy. You want to light your home, you need energy. Solar can't do it, wind can't do it. We have to have grid electricity. And the 5,200 megawatts from the GERD is a big injection for Ethiopia, for Africa. But it is small compared to what Africa needs.
Very true.
But without infrastructure, you don't have an economy.
True.
And if you want to change your economy, expand your infrastructure and advance it to the next higher technological level.
Very true. I couldn't agree more. You know, even in America, mighty America, as a global power, I believe it is in the Eisenhower period that the federal highways were had interconnected America. Look at the result, Look at the result,
Yeah, we haven't done very well with our trains, not in the United States.
No, not in trains, of course.
But
the trains are dying. The trains are dying in America.
They're better in
which is sad, by the way.
I mean, China is proving that trains work. But the United States, very poor. But what you bring up in Eisenhower is absolutely correct because he was a military man, of course. So he used the National Defense Act to build roads.
Yes, he did.
I think there's a limitation on cars, but you could drive from any point in the United States to any other point by highway.
Yes. No,
which is nice.
Which is nice, exactly.
I've done it. I've driven back and forth across the United States.
Great. Yeah, it's a great country, America, by the way.
Yes, it is.
And such projects are capital intensive.
Yes, capital intensive.
That's the challenge for African states. If you take Nazi Germany, it's another historical example. In an authoritarian society, you can force millions to work.
Right.
You know what I mean? In a sort of subjugated way.
Yes.
Professor Freeman, as you know. And the Nazis did it. In a short time, look where Germany was. Everything turned into a war machine, like a Swiss watch,
But Roosevelt did the same thing here in the United States. He built the arsenal of democracy. By planes, tanks.
Yes.
Before he even got in the war.
Yes, the preparation, before Pearl Harbor, of course. The preparation was there because you could see like a dark cloud.
Oh, Roosevelt knew.
Coming in.
So he knew by 1936.
In the case of Africa, Professor Freeman, in the case of Africa, it's capital intensive. Where would Africans get those billions, if not billions, hundreds of millions of this vital money? Yes, labor is cheap. Yes, you can use the cheap labor. But you need money, otherwise you have to force the society to move in that direction. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think I appreciate the fact you put the emphasis on capital goods because that's what you need. Machine tool industry. Now, money doesn't help in this case. What you need is credit. Credit is a line that sends you from the present into the future. That's why in my website, I put down that I'm a follower of Alexander Hamilton, who created...
That's one of my other questions, by the way.
He and others, before him and after him, they developed the concept of credit, where you extend a loan into the future at a low interest rate. The people absorbing that loan, then are given permission to purchase goods and services. So we have to... I worked with a group of Africans in the United States, not African Americans, Africans, in developing my plan with Africa Infrastructure Development Bank. So you need something like that. Now the bank needs a capital base and fusion. And if the West was smart and my country was, US was smart, we would contribute and put in the stock, capital stock. Because if we're building infrastructure, and as you say, buying capital goods and building up industry, it's money much better spent than on security and counterterrorism, which we spend billions on, if not trillions. So if you're absolutely, and Africa has no industry, no manufacturing sector. And this is again something Hamilton fought for. So we have to expand the agriculture because that's the lifeblood of just feeding people. But we have to move towards capital intensive, energy intensive industry so that Africa can survive and make its own product. And with the expansion of your population over the next 30 years and the Africa Free Trade Agreement, this is something that can work. And look, when you build a railroad, you need the rails, you need the cars, you need all kinds of things which are not produced in Africa, so you're going to have to buy them somewhere. So if the United States is smart, we give a credit card to African countries, a U.S. credit card, at a low interest rate, and that credit card entitles them to buy so much goods, capital goods from the U.S. on the credit card, which they'll pay back the credit card as the capital goods and infrastructure increase the profitability of the economy.
But for a country like America, which operates based on free market economy, and comparing it with China, for instance, given its ideological and economic system, that is a bit hard.
But the free market economy in the U.S. is not working well. What you have is a domination by Wall Street. The financiers are in control. The industrial capitalists are in the minority. More and more of the U.S. economy is being turned into a service economy and a financial economy. And we're actually decreasing the amount of physical goods that we produced or used to produce. China, there was the American system, again on the Hamilton carry through to all our presidents, Lincoln up to Roosevelt. They understood this question of building up the physical economy. And it was called the American System of Political Economy. Whether China read this or not, and of course Sun Yat-sen had a whole program for industrial and rail development. The Chinese are using what we used to do, and they put money into infrastructure. They have got, 30 to 50,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. They dwarf the rest of the world in rail. And guess what?
Even competing the Japanese and the French and the Germans who are the best in railway systems.
No. China is way above.
Way ahead of them,
And guess what? China has lifted 750 million people out of poverty. So you would say to yourself, if you were an American industrial capitalist or government, rather than making China enemy number one, which this schmo President Biden has done, you would say, well, let's look at what they did. It worked. Why don't we study it instead of attacking them?
That's your idea, by the way. That's one of my other questions. It's remarkable. 750 million people, lifting them out of poverty
Never
line.
been done in the history of
I tell always my students when we talk about, I used to teach China, Africa, in Ohio State, a grad school course, which I developed. And there you could see that, really, there is a whole, in the short span of time, a few decades, a transition from a bicycle, riding a bicycle, to a Beamers, BMW, and the Buick. If you go to China, the Buick and the Chevy and Chevrolet, the platforms and the factory systems have been dismantled and brought to by the three big giants, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, have been taken to China, and now they are riding Buicks. That's remarkable in 35, 40 years. It's a big jump. And then the apartment blocks and everything, the standard of living, of course, that has a price. Diabetics is on the rise and things like that. Overweight, people are getting to be overweight. That's the price one pays for such kinds of, economic and social development with the life standard. That is the phenomena that we are observing. Now, my point is to your question, to connect, hook it up with that is, one of your cardinal salient points is you try to draw, you draw parallels between China and the USA. You say, look, China, they are in Africa. They build railways, infrastructures, airports, ports, and the like. And you raised the idea of why not America collaborating with China?
Yeah.
Because you have to put at the pedestal the well-being of the African people. If you could comment on your idea.
In fact, the reason that President Biden had this U.S.-Africa summit last week,
Yeah.
no one was allowed to say the word China, but everybody knew that's why he did it, because the United States was afraid, panicked, because they're losing more and more influence in Africa. And I mean, look at Addis in Ethiopia. You can't pull China out of Ethiopia. They're everywhere. And that's not a bad thing, but they were panicked because of losing influence. Now, if I understood everything discussed at the summit, they're going to do all kinds of things to get some notoriety and headlines. But I don't think they're going to make the investment into economic infrastructure and building. Now, China is doing that. And there's no debt trap. That's a complete propaganda. And I addressed a conference in USIP many years ago, United States Institute for Peace in Washington.
Oh, yeah.
And I wrote a paper. I said, why not have a joint mission between the United States and China, the two big economic empires, although China will overtake us in a few years. Use the two economic giants to say, you and I together, we will help, not take over,
collaborate,
not control, collaborate.
Collaborate is the word.
On a joint mission.
Yes.
Let's end poverty. Now there's 500 million people in poverty. Let's end poverty. Let's end hunger. We could do it by collaborating, and everybody would gain. Because you can't, Africa's needs are so large. The competition could go on for years. You don't have to be worried about the other guy taking your area, because there's so much to do. And yet the Biden administration has made China #1 enemy. But the self-interest of the United States, not everybody in the government, because they're not always the best people, but the self-interest of the United States is the same self-interest as Africa. It's the same self-interest as China. What I was discussing in my lecture today. It's the promotion and development of the improvement of this material standard of living of your people. Roosevelt wrote this in 1941. He made this big speech. It was a year before we joined the war.
I see.
It's known as the Four Freedoms speech. Freedom from want, freedom from fear.
Yeah.
But he has one part of his speech, he says that people should be allowed to enjoy the fruits of scientific progress on an increasing and expanding level. That's what you want. You want people to live, improve living standard from generation to generation, and more people. I don't believe in any limitation to growth. So will the Biden administration and the summit, will the policies that they discuss lead to an increased improvement of the material standard of living of Africans? China's policies have. They're not perfect. But people have seen an improvement in their lifestyle. If the U.S. does that, then that's significant.
Great.
Frankly, I'm not.
Interesting. It's a great idea.
But I would love to see
an idea to explore, at least, and to academically to be discussed upon. Really,
It would make me very happy as an American if I saw the United States beginning to make investments that increase the standard of living of Africans.
Wonderful. Extending on that, the way I see it, indulge me, the way I see it is that I see a certain difficulty when it comes to America. For China it's easier. Why? Because given the socialist experience, the socialist sort of Dringend kind of control system, it's easy for the Chinese, still the CCP controls the political, it's a fact of life. And it's also a dirigent or a conductor of the economy. In politics and economy rub each other and they coexist in China. It's a fact. And it's easy for the Communist Party leadership and the government of China to say, to assign even policy, go to Gambia, do this in Sierra Leone, go to Ethiopia. I mean, it's easy. Why? Because these companies, which are now big corporations, very big, operating in 100 years, 100 countries rather, they used to be, and they still have traces of socialism. They are socialist based on cooperatives. They are established based on, so it's easy. for the
Easy,
Chinese
yeah.
government to give direction, supervision, to develop a strategy and say, implement this. But for America, as a free market economy, it's difficult not only for Joe Biden, I feel and I believe, to all those American previous governments and maybe future governments as well, to say, hey, extend Chevron. Go to Ethiopia, explore oil and gas. No, they say, my foot. You cannot order us. You cannot pressure us. You cannot cajole us to go that way. Why? Because it's a free market economy. The political system, legitimate government is different, and the economy is different. The leverage of control that the U.S. administration had in corporations is limited. At most, what the American government administrations, all of them can do is to advise and even plead with American corporations, please, the Chinese are running over Africa. Let's be competitive. Go and compete in Africa. Go and compete in Latin America. Let's do something. The national interest of Ethiopia of America is being hurt or is being compromised. It's very tight.
Right.
Because they who calls the shots are not the political policymakers, but the corporations themselves. And each corporation, they want to plant $1, but they want to get $100 or $50 in return. Otherwise, nothing moves. You can have Exim Bank here and there. You can have AGOA here and there. So what do you think of this challenge when it comes to American?
Well, there is a problem inherently in the free market economy. If you look at the history of the United States, we were not built on the theory of Adam Smith. We were not a free market economy. If you look at the writings of Hamilton, Carey, Friedrich List, and others, they attacked the free market. The American system of political economy said, no, the government has a role to play in developing the economy. Not to push out the private sector, but actually make the private sector more productive. The United States, now we exported that. The followers of Hamilton and Carey, they went to China, a guy named Pershing Smith. They helped create the revolution in the 1860s in Asia. Lincoln's Railroad, which he started, and of course died before it was finished, but he started it. That became a model for the whole world to have a railroad that connects between two oceans. And they the Tsar adopted it, and that's how you got the Trans-Siberian Railroad. So we used to export policies that led to industrial growth.
True.
What's happening now is that finance capitalism dominates. Money, 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 money. How much money? We used to say, no, you should make money, make a profit, but produce something. Now that's not the issue. The private sector would involve, and is actually involving itself in Africa. I mean, Caterpillar Corporation, GE is involved. But the private sector, it was never created and does not intend to fund infrastructure projects. So the government, that's a government obligation. It's what we used to call public sector on the Roosevelt.
Yeah, very true. Very
so
true.
now if the government provides the expansion of infrastructure, the private sector will be hired to do it and come in. But if we exported those types of policies, we would raise the level of economic activity in Africa.
I agree.
And it's in our history of the United States. This did not come from somewhere else. It came from the U.S.
Yes. I mean, America is a great nation of ideas.
I love it.
We export ideas as Americans.
The problem is lately we're exporting bad ideas. We used to export good
there
ideas.
are good and bad ideas, true.
I like it better when we're exporting good ideas.
Absolutely, I know where you are coming from, thank you. But the point is, you see, America has the policies and the ideas, but it has the type of government it has is limited government, even constitutionally. If you take the Scandinavian countries like Sweden, Norway, for the public good,
but that's in our
the oil and the gas and everything, social democracy predominates this economic political system. In the case of America, still among the liberal democracies, I think that's where the paradox and the issue is, I think.
I think if you look at the preamble to the Constitution, that's the best articulation of government policy. And it says in the preamble, serving the public good, to benefit the general welfare.
Yes.
So we do have that in us. That capitalism doesn't have to be opposed to that. The problem is finance capitalism, Wall Street, the City of London, they don't believe in producing anything.
Yeah.
So if you can go in, like the Wolf of Wall Street, and you can go in, and you could just make money every minute, you're considered successful capitalist. But you're not a capitalist at all because you're not building anything.
True.
How do railroads get built? How do we build a railroad in the United States on the Lincoln? We brought in, in fact, we went to Europe to look at their engines. So what you're saying, liberal democracy doesn't have to be, it is capable of doing good things for other economies and for our own economy. The problem is that the U.S. and the West has become divorced. So you have finance capitalism up here, and underneath you have a small amount of actual production going on. So the number of workers who are involved in productive activity in the U.S. economy
has gone down.
Since the war.
Service economies has gone up like crazy. Absolutely.
So how many cooks can you employ? How many bellhops can you employ?
Again,
you know, how many banks can you employ? How many day traders can you employ? You have to build something.
And even we're exporting the industrial sector, to other countries, there's a flow in that direction.
Well, think about it. If Ethiopia, just as an example, but all Africa, okay, you have credit where you can buy industrial products and capital goods. Okay, well, who are you going to buy them from? You're going to buy them from the advanced sector because you don't have the machine tool industry yet. So this benefits us. If you're actually becoming an industrial economy, it's a benefit to the U.S. economy because we have now more purchasers of our goods.
True. Interesting. So it means that unless this happens literally, it means that we shouldn't wonder. I tell my students, don't wonder if America lags behind and China predominates the African continent. We have to get our acts together, be committed, make a proactive and engaging economy, make investments, joint ventures or what have you. Of course, there are efforts here and there like Power Africa. You remember the Obama administration, a little minuscule. And then even the last 2 years, the last year and a half of Mr. Trump, you have the Prosper Africa.
But these are very minimal efforts.
Minimal effort.
Prosper Africa is not extending credit. Prosper Africa is giving loan guarantees for other companies to make loans. China actually extends credit through the Exim Bank and the Development Bank.
And by the way, as an alternative to the World Bank and the IMF, you know very well, Professor Freeman, that the Chinese have now this Asian
Asian infrastructure.
I mean, already more than 100 countries have joined it,
And we also have this very interesting potential on the BRICS. Because the Asian Industrial Infrastructure Bank, the BRICS, they're looking at a model of development. The IMF and the World Bank, the development is not in their purview right now. They want to control the money flows, but that development is something different. And I don't think there's anyone in the current U.S. administration who understands development.
Exactly. And this is the challenge for the American administrations, whether it's Joe Biden or the coming administrations, and the European Union as a group as well, or the UK, Brexit, they are by themselves, but still, this is the challenge that the Western countries are faced with.
The Western economies are collapsing. And they're collapsing themselves by themselves. I mean, some of the policies out of Germany and Britain are so stupid. I can't believe they're doing it. They're cutting their own energy sources.
It's a great. Exactly. Let's move on back to Ethiopia. I mean, I understand that you went to visit again GERD. What's your finding? I mean, we are excited as Ethiopians. You know that.
You should be.
We are very proud of.
You should.
No money, no nothing. Every zilch, as one says in Polish, in America, Yiddish, I think, zilch, you got nothing from nobody. We feel light. We feel our shoulders are not heavy. How is it? How is it coming up?
Well, I've been looking at the GERD from a distance, reading about it, and I knew it was the absolute right thing. So I defended the GERD against Egypt and others. But when you get there, it's a massive structure. Now, this gives us a good way of discussing infrastructure. And it gives us a good way of discussing what mankind does in the universe to increase economic wealth.
Yes.
You have these two mountains, and you
Yep.
have the water flowing through it.
Yeah.
And somebody comes up with a great idea and says, we're going to build this massive concrete infrastructure project between these two mountains over the water. And instead of letting this water just escape, doing no good into the Nile, we're going to make it work.
Yes.
We're going to exploit it.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly.
this is what infrastructure does. And the fact that you have a relatively weak or emerging economy in Ethiopia,
Yes.
they take up the biggest infrastructure project yet in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, yeah.
This shows you what can be done when people have a commitment
Exactly.
to this kind of development.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
frankly, again, this is another gripe I have with my country, is I don't like the fact that we have not said one paragraph praising the Ethiopians for the GERD.
Yeah.
And
It's a big achievement. Yeah.
Yes, and it's already added, two turbines have already added over 500 megawatts
Already,
to the Ethiopian grid.
Yeah, true.
So Ethiopia is now exporting to Sudan,
Yes.
Djibouti, and Kenya.
Yeah.
And the reason we don't praise this in the West, because we're no longer committed to development.
Yeah.
But it was a wonderful, one of the greatest times. There's two things I've done in Ethiopia that have just made me wonderfully excited.
Yeah.
Last year I went to Lalibela,
Okay, great,
and
great,
then this past Monday I went to the GERD.
great.
And those two things show me what great country we have and what they accomplished. Now, in my interview with ENA, I said, so the engineer told me the GERD will be complete in 2025.
Yeah.
And I compared the GERD as unifying the country the way Adwa Day unifies the country March 1st.
A good parallel, exactly.
So I said, when the GERD is completed, we have to add to the Ethiopian calendar, in addition to Adwa Day, GERD Day.
Wonderful. That's food for thought. We do hope here, the policymakers will listen to what you are saying. We'll see. We'll follow it up.
And there should be a day of celebration across Ethiopia.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it is a lesson even for other brotherly African countries. If there is a will, there is a way. Really, by our own sheer brute force, commitment, sweat, and sacrifices. Without no commitment, we did it.
Yep.
And that's the only way. If African society want to propel themselves out of abject poverty, that's the only way. Use oneself, stay focused. Determined leadership is important also.
Right.
A very determined leadership is important. Leadership with a vision that knows how to go from point A to point B. Otherwise, if it's suspended in the cloud, I mean, just everything goes wasted.
Right.
And that, I hope, will be picked up by other African countries, really, and to make a difference and really change in a very tremendous, impactful way the lives of millions.
And what is the GERD?
Yeah.
It's infrastructure.
Yes.
And what is it? And this shows you, when I was lecturing these students today, this is how the universe operates. Mankind through its mind intervenes on nature. Nature is not separate from us, and makes the economy better for people.
True, exactly.
So I'm
Wonderful.
very proud of Ethiopia.
Thank you.
I mean,
thank you.
I've been trying to go there actually for many years, so this was a high point of my visit.
Good. I'm glad you went there, and seeing is believing, you know. And I do hope more and more people will look at it, and a very impactful, generational kind of a project.
And it's a tremendous source of pride.
Pride as well. And even it's the justification for this generation that we proved it to ourselves that we can make it.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
That's the message.
Yeah.
Simple, pure, and clear. Yes, we can do it.
Yes.
And it was done. And that is the lesson for us, again, to do more, plus other developing countries, the African continent. So many things, so many questions. Time is there is a lack of time because you have to move on. Alexander Hamilton, you are, I have to confess, You are really an avid, not avid, but a committed follower of Alexander Hamilton, who is the first Secretary of the Treasury.
Yes.
He worked under the cabinet of, this is a second year political science course, We do it every, just like that,
Right.
With the father of America, I would say President, George Washington. And he's a lawyer, he's self-taught, a man of commerce, trade, and he's one of those migrants who came from the West Indies.
He was an
and
immigrant.
nobody knows that. And
He was
exactly
a man of color.
A man of color.
Immigrant.
Thank you. A man of color, an immigrant from the Caribbean, the West Indies.
Yes.
On top of that, I was wondering if he had not died at the age of 47 because of a duel with Burr, Vice President Burr, or Burr or Burr,
Right.
What if would he be able to run for office?
No, but
constitutionally, no.
No.
Yeah.
But you raised the point. I mean, I've raised the exact same issue.
Yeah.
Hamilton was a genius.
He is.
And he wrote these 4 reports for Washington.
Yeah.
Report on manufacture,
Yes.
report on banking, report on credit, and then a report on the reason that the Constitution should support a national bank.
Very true.
Many people oppose this. The Jefferson states' right crowd, the agrarian crowd, the slave crowd.
Yep.
But Hamilton said, without manufacturing, we're going to be
Yes, and commerce,
controlled by the empire. Because
Exactly.
they just had a revolution.
Exactly.
So the colonies were a mess.
Yeah.
13 colonies, $72 million in debt, no money circulating, all different species.
Yeah.
And Hamilton reorganized the debt, reorganized the colonies, reorganized the government. And Washington, I'm just reading a new biography of Washington now by Chernow. Washington was intelligent enough to back Hamilton.
Yes.
And this changed the economy.
Yeah.
And to your point, don't forget, by 1800, Washington has passed away.
Yeah.
Franklin had passed away earlier. And my view is that Hamilton was the leading political leader of our country
Consequential. Yeah.
by 1800.
True.
And I agree that if he had not been killed by Burr in a stupid duel,
Yes, it is.
then there are
was,
many theories, speculation about where we would have been, because he opposed slavery.
Yes. Yes, he did. He did.
And he opposed it because, one, he himself
Yeah.
knew slavery was wrong.
Yeah,
But two, slavery is backward. Slavery drags down your economy. It's actually not the source of wealth. Industry is the source of wealth.
True.
And we could only speculate what would have happened over the next 20, 30 years if Hamilton had been alive.
He's a visionary. I mean, he was the one who foretold the globalization process, industrialization. While Thomas Jefferson focused on agrarian model, he said, no, it's not only about agrarian system. We have to focus on commerce, trade, manufacturing.
And he said,
manufacturing and
right.
the like.
If you have a manufacturing sector,
Yeah.
Hamilton's point was you will make your agricultural sector
Yes. More
valuable.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to go somewhere else to buy your products.
Yes.
So there's a funny thing going on, as you probably know, in the United States now.
Yeah.
For the last several years, they have this play, Hamilton,
Yes, the Hamilton play.
which is written by this guy, I think a Hispanic,
Yeah.
and all the players. I didn't watch it, but then I decided I'd take a look on TV. All the players are non-white.
Yes.
So Jefferson, Washington, everybody.
Yes.
And even though he barely touches on the question of national banking, because Hamilton created the first national bank, unified the currency. Even though he barely touches on it, this is the most the American people know about Hamilton in their lives. They've never even thought about it. So even though the play, I'm not a big fan of it, but it actually has served the purpose because it's brought the name of Hamilton to the majority of American people. Because most people don't know who he is.
Yes.
I love him. He was a genius.
Yes, he was a genius. And to add one more last point in that is, he's a federalist,
Yeah,
He
Federalist,
wrote a majority of the Federalist Papers. And what a beauty,
Yes.
How he defends and promotes federalism as a system of government, how power can be shared between the center and the parts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's America.
And the problem is, you've read the Federalist Papers, I've read them, but the majority of Americans haven't. They're very profound.
Very
they're not easy reading. Because they're dealing with concepts of how to create a republic after freeing themselves from an empire. And they were written to New York State population in an attempt to convince New York State to vote for the Constitution, because you needed 9 out of 13.
Yeah.
And then they printed them up. But
Yeah.
in that day, people were reading those papers in the newspaper. Americans today would have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
You've probably read
yes.
the Federalist Papers
Yes,
more than
yes.
most Americans.
I think so, in my own humble way, yes. I better read that, I think. As professors, we better read that. We should make sense of what we are saying in class.
I pick them up from time and again. I look at different letters. I look at different chapters.
Yeah. Wonderful. Let me go on to the next one. Then back to Africa,
Right.
Africa, where to? I mean, Africa is a rich continent.
Well,
Africa is now, we have now 1.3, 1.4 billion, my God. But still a big, rich in resources and the like, but full of problems. In Ethiopia, 70% of our population are the youth. It is in a similar vein in literally most African states. We have challenges. And then we have Agenda 2063. The free trade, the new idea, the new implemented that you referred to, alluded to very briefly. How do you see Africa, the future of Africa? Is there hope? Because if you ask me, Africa is a collectivity, a continent of 54 countries, but each African country should have what? A committed leadership, a leadership with a vision, a leadership that's not corrupt, that's dedicated, that puts the country above itself.
Yep.
Otherwise, look at the military juntas in Mali, in Guinea, that come again and come again, and it's foiled and it's aborted again and again. How do you see Africa in the next 20, 30 years? Because you have been to so many countries.
well, of course, you would see it differently being an African yourself. So
Yep.
I'm just looking at it from the outside.
Yeah.
The projection is that Africa is going to have 2.5 billion people by 2050.
50, yes.
So that's about 27 years.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's going to be a long shot for me to make it that far at 72. But the question is, and you raised the question, let's put it this way. Now, and for the next 50 years, Africa is going to be the center of all political and commercial activity on the planet because of this population. 2.4 billion projection is projected to be 1 out of 4.
Would be in Africa.
1 out of 4 people on the planet will be in Africa.
Wow.
The workforce is going to be huge. The youth, I think they're estimating at 1 billion.
Wow.
It's going to have the largest workforce in the world. Now, I read one article that the European countries, the so-called white Caucasian countries, and the United States, are declining in population significantly.
Yes.
Well, I was saying that with Africa, 2.4 billion people, the largest labor force, actually the Western world is going to be importing labor from Africa because there's going to be a shortage of labor. Now, if we don't have the density of railroad transportation and we don't have a density of electricity and we don't have a robust manufacturing sector, then Africa will be subject to insecurity and instability. If we do the right things now, then Africa could look totally different. From my standpoint, and I was discussing this morning at the university, each human being is endowed with the power of creativity.
Yeah.
No animal has it, no machine has it.
True.
Therefore, having 2.5 billion people is not bad, it's good. It's more minds. It's
also
more potential for creativity.
It's also an asset, you mean, in other words. Yeah.
And frankly, the continent is actually totally underpopulated. I mean, relative to any other.
Yes.
I mean, Europe, you have 600
Yes.
people living per square kilometer.
Yeah.
So Africa is not overpopulated. And if we make the adjustments in policy now to build up the infrastructure and industry, then people will be employed, raising families, getting a paycheck, kids going to school. This is what people want. The Africans want the same thing that I want.
Normal
that everybody
life.
wants.
We're
all human beings.
Absolutely.
We all aspire to make life better for our children and our grandchildren. We depend on government to do that with us.
Yeah, true.
So
Wonderful.
This is going to be a big question, whether Africa looks like that or there's more poverty, more insecurity, more terrorism. That's up to us to decide by what we do.
Yeah. And how would you see Ethiopia in the next 20, 30 years if everything goes literally as planned and with the grace of God, I would say? What do you think?
Well, Ethiopia has the second largest population in Africa.
Yeah, yeah.
Although Nigeria, but just parenthetically, according to these projections, will be the third most populated country in the world.
Yeah.
Behind China, behind India, China, and Nigeria.
Yeah. Overtaking USA and Indonesia as well.
No, USA's population rate is declining.
Third, yeah, it's going to go down,
Even though we have more now, we can't convince our young people to reproduce.
Maybe incentives, maybe in some other countries. Yeah.
But Ethiopia has played, in my view, and as I said before the war, I was promoting Ethiopia, and Africans saw that Ethiopia represented a potentially African model, not China, but an African model.
True.
The emphasis on infrastructure, the emphasis on eliminating poverty. Now we're seeing a renewed emphasis on agriculture. If we're able to continue that, and we actually get to, quote, the density of infrastructure in, and Ethiopia plays a central role in developing the Horn of Africa.
True.
We're already exporting electricity
True.
with 500 megawatts from the GERD.
True.
In 2 years, we should have 10 times that amount, 5,200. So if this process continues, but of course the danger in Ethiopia is ethnic identity is wrong. It can be used to destabilize and manipulate people at any moment. And unless we deal with that, which I've discussed extensively this morning, then Ethiopia has a vulnerability, and we have to shut down that vulnerability by emphasizing the concept of citizenship, of the nation state, not this ethno-nationalism. Just because you belong to an ethnicity doesn't mean you have a nation of your ethnicity. And there's nothing wrong with the ethnic culture. But this belief structure that we are a nation in ourselves because we are this or that ethnicity, that's an attack on the human race. That's an attack on the nation state.
Very true.
And it has to be, you can't legislate it, you have to have a very in-depth discussion with the people. So they understand this is not what it means to be in Ethiopia.
Very true. Very clear. You are very clear. You have a clear position in regard to the ethno system. Very clear for everybody to see. One last question is, Ethiopia has relations with America, hiccups the last 2 years. How would you see the next 5 to 10 years and the like?
Well, of course, I was in Ethiopia the last 2 weeks while the Africa Summer was going on. What I saw, well, of course, everybody saw the videos and the snapshots of Prime Minister Abiy speaking with Biden watching the soccer game. From afar, it looks like there's a rapprochement to get over some of the hostilities. And I wouldn't just call them hiccups. The United States played a very bad role in this last conflict. Now, if I wanted to really win goodwill in Africa and in Ethiopia, I would, and I was in the Biden administration, I would say before the end of this year, so we're talking about 90 days, Biden announces Ethiopia rejoining AGOA. Because there was no justified reason for kicking it out.
I agree.
Because if you read the argument that Biden made, he said the war in Ethiopia was a threat to U.S. national security. There's no threat. There's no justification.
True.
So does this summit lead to a more cooperative relationship? Which would mean this. And this would be a big turning point. The massive reconstruction in Ethiopia. I read yesterday in one of your newspapers, 700 billion birr is needed for reconstruction in just Amara.
Amara region,
Now, Tigray is going to be worse. So you're talking about trillions of birr are going to be needed, which is going to more than the Ethiopian economy can handle. Why doesn't President Biden announce a major investment plan to help Ethiopia in its reconstruction process?
Great point.
If he did that, he'd be a hero of Africa.
Point. Absolutely. And Ethiopia-American relations goes back for more than a century. Korea, Congo, Arab, and there is this the human relations. Most Ethiopians elite were educated in America. There's this love for America, the American culture, the enticing. And Ethiopia was and could be again, once again, a strategic, strong partner for
Yes,
America.
yes.
Really. And
However, I mean, there are people in this political, economic group, I call them the oligarchy, and the political, geopolitical doctrine. They still want to push Abiy down or push him out in his leadership in Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa. I mean, right now, it looks like the Biden administration has dropped that regime change, but there are others who still want it.
Yeah, true. But look, South Vietnam, it failed, and then one has to make up with the United Vietnam, you know. Even the Cuba rapprochement, to a certain limit, I mean, you have to make up and move on. You know, you cannot, like a fossilized idea, stay in the past. And you know, America.
And frankly, there's nothing dividing Ethiopians and Americans. It's in the self-interest of America to develop Ethiopia.
Exactly. And the domestic issue is, you know, if people support Abiy, so be it. That's it. One should accept.
Of course. If you don't like it, vote him out.
That's it.
Don't drive him out with a
war. Exactly.
Yeah.
And choosing one's leadership also is going beyond the pale, I think, if I'm not wrong. Professor Freeman. So one last question is, it's good to have you in Ethiopia, as a good friend of Ethiopia. And if there is anything else you'd like to say, because this is Christmas, I know, you know, for Christian faith followers, for friends of Ethiopians here and abroad, we are watched also globally. If there is a sort of a Christian Christmas message plus a New Year's message that you'd like to say, I would be more than honored to listen to you.
As I say, I started discussing with Ethiopia people in your government around 2010, thereabouts. So I met many of your ambassadors and others. And I was very much attracted to the pro-growth spirit of Ethiopia.
True.
And one of my friends, who's now in the government here, said to me, we don't want to manage poverty, we want to eradicate it. I love that phrase.
Yes.
So there's a spirit and commitment. And I believe part of this comes from the victory at Adwa, where the people were able to defeat the European military on the battlefield. And I think that mentality has become part of the mindset of Ethiopia.
I agree.
And your people,
very true.
People do bolder things, like launching this dam, like launching the railroad. So that is the pathway forward. If Ethiopia is allowed and helped, then we can get past the war. We can move forward with raising the material standard of living people.
Yes.
As I said, if Biden was as thoughtful as I would like him to be, he would make a Christmas present either on our Christmas, which is dropping sanctions, returning Ethiopia to AGOA, and making massive investments in the growth plan and reconstruction of the North. Let the reconstruction begin. And let the people see that we can live in peace and prosperity.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Freeman. Thank you for your time and for your wisdom. And I'm really happy to have gotten the chance to get to know you in person as well as to interview you. I do hope and cross my fingers this today will not be our last encounter.
No, I don't.
Whether here or in America, we'll stay in touch. Professor Freeman, thank you for coming.
Lovely to be here and had a very good time talking with you.
Thank you. Same here. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today was Professor Lawrence Freeman, a very well-known public figure, a professor, a researcher, a good friend of Africa. For the last 35 years, he has devoted himself crisscrossing Africa, studying on Africa, suggesting ideas, policy options and the like. He was not just a visitor. Of course, Africa has a lot of potential places to visit, but he also, shared his thoughts in his writings, as well as, suggested solutions to problems and the like, which some of them we have discussed today. And we'll continue the conversation in another episode. This program is the Voice of the Diaspora. I took the liberty to invite the good gentleman here as a good friend. He passes as an Ethiopian. That's the reason why.
Thank you.
That's the reason why. Exactly. That's the honest fact. That's why I decided to invite you. Ladies and gentlemen, next week I'll be bringing another visitor to our Voice of the Diaspora. Until I see you next week, this is Professor Brukailu from Nahu TV. I will use this golden opportunity to wish you Merry Christmas for those who follow the Christian faith, as well as Happy New Year. I wish our expats living in Ethiopia, I wish them all the best, success, health to your loved ones as well. Until I see you again, I take leave of you. It's me, Brooke. Once again, Nahu TV, goodbye. I take leave of you. Au revoir.